Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines of the stories that make our community tick. Now, when I say that, people think of headlines like they had to lock down the school, or someone got elected, or someone got arrested. But you know what? There's a more important kind of headline that you read every day in the New Haven Independent, most often with a byline by Tom Breen, but by others too, which is how we make big or long-term decisions that actually affect our lives more. Often at a place called the City Plan Commission. Now, don't fall asleep, folks. City Plan Commission doesn't sound like, When Doves Cry or something. It doesn't make your heart flutter. But in fact, I would argue, and if you read the New Haven Independent, I'm sure you'd agree, that the big decisions about who lives where in our city, what kind of places get built and don't get built, where you can park or not park or have a business, get made by this body, and they're a hard-working bunch of volunteers who work late into the night and have done it year after year, and two of the heroes of that commission are here with us today. Leslie Radcliffe, the chair of the commission, has been here before, one of my favorite community people in New Haven, and another one of my favorite community people, Ed Mattison, who is the former chair. He's now called the vice chair, but I thought you usually get like emeritus or first past president or something. You want to get close, yeah.
Or a badge or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Sweatshirt.
Boy Scout honor, right. So anyway, thanks for coming in, because what I want to talk to you about, folks, today is you've had a lot of big decisions in city plan, and I'm not looking to ask you, tell me about this decision or that decision. I want to ask you where we're going as a city. Since you're really at the doing the hard day-to-day work or week-to-week work of deciding where we're going as a city, I want to talk to you about that and what even the City Plan Commission is. Tamika MacArthur says good afternoon. Hi, Tamika. Thanks for listening. So first of all, how's it going? How's the City Plan Commission going? Is it working well, Leslie Radcliffe? Are you guys getting a lot of business done, functioning well as a team?
I believe we are working well. We work very well as a team. I think the number of years that we've been together has helped to solidify and gel us, and we can tag team. We can feed off of each other. We can be open and honest and transparent with each other.
So there's been continuity. And I'm going to ask you, Leslie, if you don't mind, to get real close to the mic.
Sure.
But when you say years together, some people say you got to have change people on boards and commissions, get new blood. Other people say, it takes a while to get up to speed and work as a team. And how long have you folks been on the board? Yeah, I don't know why I'm not hearing you, Ed. Are you speaking in the mic? Yeah, I'm still not hearing you. Huh. Okay, how about now?
Hello?
There you go. Okay, so you've been on the board how many years, Ed?
I've been 14 and a half years.
Wow. That's a lot of late nights for no money when you're busy in the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah. And I was chair for 12.
Wow. And Leslie, how many years you been on it?
I have no idea.
Really?
I really don't remember.
But
it's been a long time.
More than 40, less than 2?
Yeah, I think maybe about 4 or 5.
Yeah, something like that.
I think I'm in my second term,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been chaired, I guess, for 2 years since.
And how long is the term?
Terms of 4 years.
Yeah, but the charter says that my term has expired, but unless they appoint somebody else,
you're still on.
Continuing. Yes.
All right. So you both have many decades of community service. So when you came to this commission, Ed had been a lawyer for the city, a legal aid lawyer suing the city, running a behavioral mental health center. I mean, he really knows his community, as does Leslie, who grew up here, has worked in all sorts of fields, has organized her neighbors in the Hill to do community gardens and fight back against crime and keep landlords accountable, and also do community work to help the needy, and sits on many public boards and commissions, from neighborhood housing service chair.
Right.
And so you guys know the city, you know the issues, and then you bring it these decisions. How does that play out? When you're running the City Plan Commission, what kind of decisions are you making for our city?
I'm going to leave that to Ed since he's got the most experience.
Well, from the outside, the way I summarized it, tell me if this is accurate, is that the kind of decisions you make are site plans, meaning if someone wants to build something, you have to say, yes, this goes according to the rules. And that's important because you don't want pollution, danger, public health, or different kinds of uses that we've cited. You make exceptions. If someone says, the rules say I can't go 2 more stories or keep 3 parking spaces out or like have danger of everyone falling to the water, there's a reason I can't do that. So I want the special exception. You don't usually decide those, right? That's usually the zoning board, but they ask your advice.
That's right. If they get a request for an exception, they send it to us, and we discuss it and we make a recommendation.
Right.
And do they usually follow your recommendation?
I would say it's probably balanced. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Right.
It just depends on how
what
they feel
expertise
that day.
do you have that they don't have? Like, don't most cities have planning and zoning commissions, and we have two separate?
Yes.
So what's that
I don't
about?
know why that is, but that's true.
I think with zoning, you probably have to have a lot more of the technical expertise and knowledge of the ordinances. And
Narrowly, the zoning code.
in the zoning codes and such. Whereas city planning makes sure that whatever developers and buildings are coming through are in line with the city's comprehensive plan.
Right, so we've always done that. We have
Right.
comprehensive plans, and we update them every once in a while, saying, like, we want this part of
Yes.
town to
So
be where people
there are
live
the
with-
technical things that we do have to be mindful of, but there's also the non-technical. How do certain things fit in a community or in a neighborhood?
And you
know?
also lately have also been asked to look at policy, right?
Yes.
You voted on an inclusionary zoning
Yes.
policy,
Yes.
which
Yes.
means when people build stuff, some of it's got to be affordable housing or rezoning districts, because it was city planners, your forebears, who decided New Haven would be a city that would try to be like the suburbs and would divide, it would be built around the car, and they would try to
Yes.
divide parts of town that had businesses, part of towns where people lived, parts of town where they had factories. And then we've been trying to undo that in a big way in New Haven. We felt that was a real mess up.
Yes, and certainly during my term as chair and now under Leslie's leadership, we are thinking of those things all the time and trying to make sure that we're not doing something else stupid that is going to bite us.
I want to come back
Lay
to that
down.
because that gets to nature planning, but Tamiko
Yeah.
has a very specific question.
Okay.
And this is part of the reason, if I'm not mistaken, you're so busy. So many apartments are being built around town. I think more than any of us have seen in our lifetimes.
Correct.
I don't think any of us were here in 1955, correct, when they started building a lot of apartments at that time downtown. What year did you get here?
What time did I? 64.
All right, so you were at the tail end of it. There was still a little
Yeah.
stuff
Oh,
being
yeah.
built.
Well, I came to town as a law student, and the first thing I got involved in was working with a group that was trying to stop a highway going right through the
The
middle
Ring
of town.
Road? You talking about the Ring Road?
The Ring Road.
Or
yeah.
the completion of Route 34?
The Ring Road was the thing I
And that's the
worked
thing they were
on
going to
the
build a big
most.
superhighway, like around East Rock all the way
That's
around
right.
down 34, back around into the hill.
And it was all just because Yale wanted to knock down a building.
Right, it was Griswold.
I mean, what kind of stuff is that?
Well, Ed, did you ever go to the City Plan Commission as a law student, idealistic law student, wanting to politely burn downtown?
I went several times to the Board of Alders and talked about things.
Did you feel
They're
that
the same things that I talk about now.
Did you feel any frustrations from that other point of view about alders or others telling you we have to stick to the way these laws are written, and you're saying, what if the laws aren't written well? Or the codes and the zoning?
Oh, yeah. Well, it took a while before they and the rest of us were really thinking these things were not written in stone and they could be changed. And
there could be a better way.
Yeah, and Leslie's been very active with.
Well, Leslie, you grew up in Brookside, and
Yeah.
what do you remember? And you grew up there in the 60s and 70s as well, correct?
I did.
And what do you remember about when people were making decisions about how to? And Luz Ramos says, "Good morning, Leslie. Good morning, Luz."
Good morning. Lou. I don't remember too much back then. I was a wee child, and I was in school. But what I do remember is the way that the city was divided. With specifically Brookside. I'm not sure who decided that was a good place.
But that was
to build,
actually
but-
planning that said public housing development should be on the edges of town and concentrating people. Then we had a rethinking of that in the 80s when we turned down stuff. City Plan Commission, we said, you don't want to group people all together and get them closer to services and be part of the community. But there have been a lot of back and forth of what that means. Very idealistic. Good. I would argue the people who are exactly like you, some of them said, go ahead with this plan. This is the smartest thing people are telling us back in 1955.
At that time,
Yes.
yes.
Just, I don't, you don't have to agree with that.
Yeah, well, it was true that it was
I
true.
know I would have fallen for everything. I used to tell Dick Lee, who was the mayor during that period, I'm so glad I wasn't here when you were mayor. He said, I would have loved if you were here, you smart guys. That was dumbest. Like, I would have agreed with everything you were doing because it sounded like all the smart, ambitious people were doing stuff, and you messed up the whole city.
I came up. My hero is Jane Jacobs. When I started reading what she was writing,
The Death and Life of Great American Cities.
The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and she did a lot of journalism and all that kind of stuff. And I thought everything she said, I memorized because I thought, I still feel that way.
The classic critique that I would argue, even though it was written in the 50s and 60s, when it was popular, it's what guides you folks and all of the planning that goes on in New Haven now, which is said the city should be places where people do all sorts of stuff together, and it grows organically from the individual decisions people make about where to put a house, where to put a store, and mixed uses, don't build around the car, do historic preservation. At the time, one of her biggest debating opponents was a guy named Ed Logue.
Yes.
Ed Logue was the powerful development administrator in New Haven who drew up the plans for urban renewal. And he would have been the person you would be at City Plan Commission meetings with now if he were alive to hear, right? I was reading just this past year a debate he had with her. And I've always had what you felt. Jane Jacobs was right. I was a little sympathetic to Logue. He said, Jane Jacobs, you live in Greenwich Village. Everything you're doing there is making sure that nobody who doesn't have money or isn't white is going to be able to move in. And you're freezing something at a moment in time. So I wonder whether today's city planners have drawn the wrong lesson from Jane Jacobs. And this is a very biased statement. Ready?
Ready. Okay.
Her point was that planners were getting in the way, even if they're well-intentioned, with their models and from a distance and their compromised view of the world, of what a city should look like, or overruling how people were making a city work with their encounters on the sidewalk, putting 2 apartments above their store, and that you have to have mixed use, you have to have smaller density, you have to have walkable streets. Now that New Haven was the best example of why she was right about what was wrong then, every time we build something now, the planners say you have to have a store on the first floor and 2 apartments above.
No.
You got
walkability.
And I wonder whether than taking her deeper point about the humility of planning and the limits of planning, and not looking at where what she did actually reinforced the status quo for the privileged versus the underprivileged and protected a static view of what one people frozen in time think the best kind of development is, that you undercut the deeper point.
I'm not sure that I would just wholeheartedly agree with Jane Jacobs or Ed Logue.
Logue was clearly wrong in how he did things. Everyone will agree that now.
Well, how he did, but in looking, I come from a different perspective that, number one, everything's not going to work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cookie cutters. What might work in one community may not necessarily work in another. So when you're talking about density doesn't work all over. Lower density doesn't work all over. Walkability doesn't work. So it's almost like there's different pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together, how they connect together. All right, everything doesn't have to be the same.
And in fact, Leslie Radcliffe, I believe, was in the picture, if I'm not mistaken, when city planners walked the Hill about the proposal for requiring fewer parking spaces.
No, she wasn't in that.
Leslie was hiding out from her constituents.
No,
she was busy with 3 other meetings.
I think I might have had another appointment or something, but I'm
just teasing you.
That walk actually took place in the Hill South.
Okay. Anyway, I was just teasing you, Leslie.
Right.
I was saying your point is well taken, in that when we were doing a citywide redrawing, we had this very Jane Jacobs view, which was that you shouldn't have to have a car for everybody. Don't build a city around the car.
Right, but you also shouldn't tell me that I don't need a car. Because I may need a car, and if I need a car, I need to have somewhere to park my car.
And some of those hill streets, when you make them dense, right? They said
absolutely. I live on one of those streets. Yes,
I'm a working class person who needs to get to a job, and although it wasn't Truman's a little wider where you live. I'm talking about like Arthur and some of the streets that are like so narrow, right?
Yes.
And you have people crowded living together. The 2 things they said, if you wanted density, because the other issue is mother-in-law apartments, whether you could build by right an extra apartment out to your house.
So let's get this straight. I do live in a dense. My street is similar to Arthur Street. It's a one-way street with parking on both sides, one lane. It's not like Greenwich, Avenue or Greenwich Avenue,
Right,
you know,
people-
where
yeah.
where you've got, you know, I don't know,
Yeah,
that's like a
right.
super highway, you know, where there's enough room for the ice cream truck to park, you know, and the
Yeah.
school bus to make the turn. So
And
my
actually, in
neighborhood
Truman,
is
I think
great.
used to be two-way, and they made it one-way, so that there wouldn't be a lot of drug traffic coming in and out, right?
I
I'm talking
don't
like
know
in the
how
70s,
it could ever
80s,
have
yeah.
been two-way, because if
'Cause-
you have
and then it's
cars
narrow.
parked on
Yeah.
on both sides, so and it's very dense, and every house does not have a driveway, so we do have a parking issue on Truman.
That's what I'm
but-
saying. So people said our real life, the theory's good in a
Right.
general way, but there's no way we're not going to have cars if we're going to work and take our kid to
Absolutely.
school and go to CVS
Yes.
and get groceries. And right now the cars are on top of each other. And the other thing they said is we can hear next door, we're so close together, when someone's screaming out in pain or listening to loud music. And now with these mother-in-law apartments, but the mother-in-law apartments, the accessory dwelling units, ADUs, right, where you can build that extra in your house, are considered an essential tool for affordable housing. Because they
Yes.
say that the best way,
Who says that?
advocates for affordable housing all over the country, they say that one way you're going to make it easier for people to afford is if
But
you have
that's
your
what
house,
I'm saying.
you can build
know,
an extra unit.
there are some people that do say that, and that may work in some communities, but it doesn't work in every community. And if you ask people that live in a specific neighborhood, is density going to work? Adding more housing units in this area, is it going to work? You may get a no answer. So the add-ons, the mother-in-law apartments, you know, the garden cottages in the back.
I always
you know,
wondered what happened to the fathers-in-law.
That-
Is it because the men die earlier?
you're not in the picture. You know, but that is not going to work in every neighborhood.
Actually, my daughter-in-law did want to make me an apartment, but with my wife. So what do you do then as the chair of the City Plan Commission, Leslie Radcliffe, when
What
you
you
have
do
this
as chair of City
philosophy?
Planning Commission is you get in your car and you drive in the neighborhood, and you look and you see, you actually sometimes have to have an actual view of what is going to work. I remember something that came up one time, and it was about, you know, building a 4-story on a street, which seemed like it was going to be fine because on that street there were 3-story buildings and 4-story buildings. However, at this particular lot, this 4-story building was going to cut out the sunlight from the little house that was in the back of it that had a garden in the back, which means the woman's garden was.
And Leslie
gonna
Radcliffe
die.
created a community garden with her neighbors on Truman Street, which
Right.
is one of the best parts of
So,
that street.
so if you drive in that neighborhood, you know, and you actually take a look to see what is actually going to work right
what street?
there.
What
Yeah.
street was that?
I don't remember. I think it was in the East Rock neighborhood somewhere over there around the station.
And then what can you do as a city planner at Mattison and Leslie Radcliffe? Let's say
Yes.
you say common sense says that while the overall idea about keeping 3 to 4 in a neighborhood, it makes sense, but they want an exception. This exception will remove sunlight, a garden. But what if the code says, what if the lawyer who they paid a lot of money to because they make a lot of money renting out this property says, hey, but you know, this is a hardship because under the laws
as of right. Yeah.
well, it's not as
Well,
a
as of
right.
right
no,
doesn't
but I
come
mean
before you.
that's a lot of the
Yeah,
speak
a
that
lot
we
of
get
it, that's
from
right.
the
But
attorneys
this was
that'll say
not. But
as
this
of
was
right.
not as of right.
Right.
Correct. They want an
Yeah.
exception. Was it because the other ones also got special permission when they built the 3 and 4?
They probably did.
So
have a
what did you
special
do? And it doesn't have to be this specific case. What do you do when you say common sense, human beings, real life? I checked it out. Not a good idea. Their lawyer has a legal case they're going to be able to bring to court, and we have to sometimes follow the rules of the city that we don't think are so great.
Sometimes. But
No, what's the
one of the things that I've always liked about the City Plan Commission when we weren't on TV, which I hate,
you're on TV?
was what?
You're on TV?
No, not on TV.
On
but
Oh,
you
so
know,
we're going to
woof.
get to that.
Yeah.
We're going to be the grouchiest old people in New Haven in a few minutes because we're going to talk about online government.
I hate that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it has a terrible effect on on what we
All right,
know.
well, let's go back to that in a minute. But what about this
Okay.
issue of if you think it's a bad idea,
Yes, we
but
can.
the rules say that you should do something that's a bad idea? Is there wiggle room in the rules?
There usually is wriggle room,
And-
and
and-
also we talk to people. You
Right.
try to bring them together. You try to get them.
Actually, you both are very good at that.
I think we are. both very
I think, and I think that's what it is that we bring to city planning that we're able to do. You know, we're able to go beyond what does the rule say and what does the regulation say. And if this is a special exception, then we can also bring special exceptions to their special exception. Okay, this may sound like a good idea to you as the developer, but take a look at the community that you're in. See how it's going to negatively impact that community. That is not going to make you a good neighbor. Do you not want to be a good neighbor? you know?
And no one knows more about being a good neighbor than Leslie Radcliffe and Ed Mattison, the chair and vice chair of the City Plan Commission. Tamiko asks, can garages be converted to apartments? Did we pass ADUs?
I think we did give a positive referral.
Because California
to the Board of
said
Alders.
that now everyone in California can build an ADU. Everybody. But what's
Whoa.
coming in is the kind of megalorns we have, rather than the neighbors who want to do it for their mother-in-law. They're coming in to make more money per square unit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we're trying
So
to
Tamiko
avoid.
said, does this apply to the entire city? I wish I had Tom Breen here because I don't remember if this has passed yet.
No, it hasn't passed.
Okay.
Yes.
And,
we're gonna.
It hasn't passed.
It hasn't passed.
Okay.
And I think sensible people don't like ideas that suddenly you change all the rules for everybody, because clearly some people
It's going to
are
work for some.
Yeah, it's going to work to your point exactly.
But what about the positive size ADUs? I mean, there's a lot of positive.
I'm all in favor. When
But right
I was
now
older,
But right now you have to go before you guys to say, give me the permission one by one.
yeah.
Well, some people tell me in the city that's okay. It's not as many as you think. Other people say just make it routine that you could do it as of right, and then if someone wants to stop it, come up with a special reason so Leslie can be reasonable and drive out and see if it makes sense. But other people say it's really not that many. If it's 5 or 10 a year, everyone should come forward. And the idea is, what do we want to promote as a society? So in California, they said housing is so out of control for the working class that you just have to say blanket. Everybody can build that extra unit. We're not talking about 10-story apartment buildings. It'll immediately make a difference. Then there's unintended consequences of policy, which is that it's the mega landlords who are investing, flipping the properties, driving up the value, and doing it for profit.
I think we'd rather be the exception than the rule.
Okay.
You know, because the rules don't work for everybody, and if the rules apply to everybody, you know, then there's probably going to be a lot more negative than positive. You know, so I think we'd rather be the exception to the rule. And if you want the exception, you got to come to city planning.
And we're talking. Okay, so yes, Ed.
I was going to say, we have a special situation in New Haven that never happened to any other place I've ever lived, where these mega corporations are coming in and buying up everything.
Edward Turnbull says, "Good morning, good morning." That's happening in some other places, but it's happening here.
Yeah. But it certainly happens
hundreds of millions
here.
of dollars the last few years in our small city, buying thousands of units, and now a small set of what we call mega landlords own much more low-income rental property subsidized than the housing authority.
Yeah, so something we just passed said, you got to tell us who the principals are. You have to, they can't
Okay,
hide behind.
You're talking about something called limited liable corporations, which
Yeah.
I've always thought meant evil. Like, this stops you from having to be responsible. You mean no,
You're
if you're going to
right.
do something
Well,
crappy.
certainly in real estate.
But
God.
everyone uses them. And technically, when you sign up, so if you buy a property, these mega landlords that have thousands of units, and they're following the law, by the way, they form a separate limited liability corporation for each property or set of properties. That way, if they kill someone through negligence, you can't go after their other properties. And they can hide who they are often.
Yes.
Because when they register, so the name, when you look up who owns it, it isn't Bill Jones, it's
19
Destroy the Environment LLC. Then you look up at the Secretary of State's office who owns Destroy the Environment LLC. You'll have an agent that's usually their lawyer, and they're usually at a certain address on Whaley Avenue, 419. And then sometimes they'll say a principal.
Yeah.
And that's how you get it. Or then you can look up documents, who signs for the mortgage. So you guys just gave a positive recommendation, it hasn't passed yet, for an Ellicker administration initiative that would say we wanted you to sign who the person we call if there's no heat or everything's about to fall down. And not your lawyer agent, not the Destroy the Environment LLC in Astoria, Queens. Like, who are you?
We need
Where do we
a body.
find you?
Right.
Think it'll make a difference?
I believe it will. I believe it will. I know that there's probably going to be, a movement by, whoever the LLCs are to try to, stop this or take it to court or whatever and say, it's unjust. It's a violation of our right to privacy or whatever it is that their attorneys are going to come up with. But, when something needs to be done from a tenant's perspective, you need to know who is it that you need to call. Whether it's LCI making the phone call, or the and any other entity that's got to make sure that the residents are safe and that they're made whole. You need to be able to call a body, and somebody needs to be able to respond. And you can't spend 2 and 3 weeks trying to dig through the state of Connecticut.
Usually
business.
it doesn't work anyway.
It doesn't work. You know, you go down in the
Have you
rabbit
had
hole.
that experience in the Hill? Tell me about that. Tell me a time you had that experience.
We do have an LCI specialist who's pretty good at this, and he does do his due diligence, where he at least will come up with a property manager. He may not be able to find out who the owner is, but he will be able to track down a property manager. I don't know how he does. Shout out to Art Natalino. I don't know how he does what it is that he does, but you know, he will find a body. But it takes time. It takes time. And in the meantime, you know, people are either in distress. No heat, you know, garbage all over the place.
And by the way, Tamiko asked, garages are part of ADUs, right? My understanding is when you're talking about building that extra unit house, that often involves converting a garage.
I believe it depends on the square footage, setbacks.
I just saw one the other
that.
day on Poplar Street. I mean, they're pretty common.
There are some that are very lovely, and they're built for that, you know. But there's others. It's a garage.
Just as long as it's mothers-in-law and not fathers-in-law. You want to keep up the neighborhood, right?
There might be 2 separate units.
You're listening to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio, and we're talking to 2 New Haven greats, Leslie Radcliffe, Ed Mattison, Chair and Vice Chair of the City Plan Commission. So one reason I admire what you do and I would never, ever, ever switch places with you is because you go to very long meetings at night.
Oh, God.
When you're tired, you want to be cozy in your sweats, you want to be drinking some tea and reading the paper. And you guys have listening to people pretty upset about stuff, and often if they're upset about stuff, they decide to be mad at you, even though you have nothing to do with it, right? And it's just a long time to talk about stuff. And now something has changed. Tell me if I'm right. And I don't know if this is because so many more people are building, so you have to see more issues, or because since the pandemic you've gone online. Your meetings are getting longer, a lot longer, and you're having more of them. Why is that?
I think the fact that we're online allows for that because you have the convenience of just being available. Number one, you don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to park. You don't have to go to a meeting. You don't have to get back home to put the kids to bed. You can just go on mute and turn the video off or tell the kids to go in the other room.
And be careful while your camera's on.
I'm sorry?
Be careful while the camera's on.
Be careful while the camera's on?
Yeah, when you're home and you're on
Absolutely. Make sure you have on pants, you know. But also, you know, sometimes we do have to tell people, please put your, you know, device on mute because the dog's in the background and things like that. But it makes it a lot.
My dog.
Yeah, his dog all the time. But it's more convenient for people to, not only for applicants, but also for the public to participate in these meetings because they can do it from the comfort of their home. So we do have a lot more participation, viewing, you know, and I think that is also a good part because we're more exposed to the public, you know, so they're able to see what it is that we're doing, you know, and I think we have to be more mindful of what it is that we're doing because more people can see it, you know. So we're going to do probably a little bit more due diligence.
Well, my feeling, I don't quite agree.
Okay.
My feeling is that...
Don't quite agree means you're really wrong.
Well, you know, we do that a lot. He's just nice about it.
He is. You're both nice.
Yeah. I just feel this is an invention of the devil. That there's no possibility, really, of working things out over Zoom. You know, you get people, or occasionally it happens that people will speak to each other in a way that, you know, allows for changes that make something better.
And why is that different on Zoom?
What?
Why is that different?
Because people, why is it on Zoom? Because
like, why is it easier in person?
You can't go in the back.
Yeah.
You can't. We have to be on the record at all times when we're talking about. But the neighbors and the landlord, they can go off in a corner and try to resolve it, and often do when they're in person.
Can they go into private chat on the Zoom?
Oh, no.
No, we can't even go into private chat. We're not even supposed to entertain you.
So you folks have just, as we did with city planning, you folks have just respectfully given different views on one of the burning issues of our time. And it's not just about Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
It's about the whole issue of transparency. The roots of that predate the modern internet, which is that obnoxious reporters like me say everything should be public. I want to read your emails. I want to see your
Right.
memos, and there are pros and cons to that, right? We don't want you picking candidates in the back room because it should be transparent. We should know what you're doing. So Leslie points out that an upside is that more people watch what you're doing. You're going to be more careful.
We have a good audience.
Now, I do prefer in person. Now, I'm not saying that Zoom is the best thing, but there are those beneficial aspects to Zoom that we would not have with in person.
Would it be less
But
of
with
a
Zoom,
long meeting?
you can hide behind the camera.
Right.
You know, you can hide behind the camera when you're not in person.
But you do see pros in that you're more
Oh, yeah.
accountable, more transparent, and you see negatives is that there's less of that in-person human collaboration that can solve
Right.
problems.
There you go.
Right.
What about the length of meetings? Is that better or worse? It's obviously good if more people want to know what you're doing. Is it bad if democracy doesn't take any effort on a person's part and it's just like clicking on listicles on the internet? Or is it good to make it like clicking like this is bringing me back to Ross Perot in 1992. He ran for president. He said, "Every bill before Congress, I want everyone in the country to to click on when we vote on a bill." And then nerdy people like me said, democracy doesn't mean everybody signs everything all the time. A representative democracy is that you elect people democratically to take time to bone up on something and work out compromises and improvements in a deliberative process on your behalf. And then every 2 or 6 years, depending on Congress or Senate, you get to look at what they've done and decide if they did it well. Other people say that narrowly defines transparency because you want to know what they're doing all the time. It's an honest, good tension.
Yeah.
And with the internet, people have lost transparency meant that you don't have privacy. And some people argue we become less human beings because Ed was just talking about the way you go in a back room and talk about something. Well, back room sounds like non-transparent, corrupt sometimes, but other times it's like human beings working out problems.
Exactly.
So it's a tension.
Yes.
He says it's the devil. I think I'm hearing from you, Leslie.
She
it's
doesn't think so.
complicated, but I kind of like it.
It is complicated. I kind of like it, but I do prefer the in person. Okay, I mean, but when things are not an option, then my tendency is just to find the good in it. This is what we have right now. So let's
Well, why
promote what
can't
makes
the
it
Board of
work.
Aldermen is in person? Board of Alders is in person.
I found that out. When they went in person in the last meeting that they had wasn't on Zoom. I couldn't find it.
It was on New Haven Independent.
But while the meeting was going on, I'm looking for it, and it's like, where is the
live
meeting?
streamed on the Independent. It was
You
hard
know?
to hear though. So
Okay.
what about that? Why aren't you in person?
Because we don't want to be right now. Because I think it's because with our group being such a small number, we get to decide pretty much whether or not we're comfortable being in a closed room, in around people.
Well, you're not the
during
only
this,
one.
I don't
during the
think-
pandemic.
A
you know?
lot of public agencies, including most but not all of the bodies in Hamden, continue to be on Zoom. So every agency is making a different decision. There's no right answer. And I would argue that anyone gives anybody else a hard time about their conclusions about COVID doesn't have much humility because reality keeps changing.
Yeah,
and
oh
what we
God,
know.
yes.
So it's tough decisions. There are no villains or heroes here.
Yeah.
The board all decided to go in person. You guys didn't.
We haven't been asked that question yet.
Yeah,
But-
I think
but-
we were. This decision was made in City Hall. not
Well,
by
that was
us.
because everything went offline originally, but now
But
other
people are
agencies
starting
have
to
come
come
back.
back.
People
Yeah.
have come back for like 8 months now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should, by the way. This is not give you guys a hard time.
I don't
This is
think-
like
I-
try to find out what you're thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We haven't been asked the question, as whether or not we would like to come back in person.
But maybe we should think about
but
that
I mean
and
that
talk
that's a
about it.
question.
By
that
the way,
should-
I don't know what
should
you
be
should
asked.
do.
What?
I don't know what you should do. I'm
Oh.
just saying, when you do come back,
Yeah.
if you ever do, what will change? Will it go back to the way it was before, or will something change?
I believe there. I mean, just because we've been away from it from so long that something will change. Whether or not it should change, I don't know, because I think we were functioning. I think we were functioning to
you-
maximum efficiency.
Right now you have less,
Prior to
now
I
you have
think
less
we're doing
efficiency.
pretty good.
Now
Yeah.
you have more participation.
I don't
You have
think
longer
less
meetings.
efficiency. No, it's not less efficiency, but we're just doing it differently.
But you have longer meetings.
We set a time limit on the meeting.
But
2
then you
hours.
have, but then you have twice as many meetings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Half life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you are spending
because after 10 o'clock,
But-
you start to get a little loopy.
Yeah.
right.
I
But
don't think-
until COVID,
Wait.
you did it once a month. Now you
Yeah.
do it twice a month.
Yeah.
Which is not criticism either. I'm asking.
What this has to do with, though, it seems to me, is mostly the rate of building and the fact that.
So it's more about that.
It's more about that. I mean, the rate. I mean, in my 14 years, I would say the number of applications to do something has tripled. So if it takes that, the mechanism doesn't.
And plus, you had stuff they could do the airport. Yeah, for some of these big issue things in addition to the apartments.
Stuff, yeah.
Okay. Some people say, I've talked to public officials who say, I love these Zoom meetings. Like Leslie said, they see what we're doing. So many more people participate. There's more government going on.
Yeah.
We don't want to go back in person. Other people say it's so important to be in person. Democracy is not a spectator sport, that we want to be able to talk to each other. And then a third group says we want to do both.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
But will hybrid be the worst of both worlds? That's a lot of people will come on and not be able to respond to others or collaborate, but make meetings go longer and have the people who show up. Like when you teach both, it's hell, according to people I know, including my family who teach. They say, you're kind of talking to the screen, but you're trying to interface with the people in the room.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of, if I were running the world, which fortunately.
Well, you're number 2 on the City Plan Commission, New Haven, Connecticut.
So you kind of run the world. After me.
I would do a TV version of the meeting so that it would be, people could watch
viewable.
It would be entirely viewable, and people could, as they can with Zoom,
well, you could, by the way,
type in questions.
By the way, you could do this now. I know you have tech-savvy people in your family.
Yeah.
In under 7 minutes, someone in your family can show you what to do with your phone, and everyone in the City Plan Commission, everyone at home can watch it on the internet and send you questions.
But that's my cell phone.
Yeah, but he can even give you a laptop, or he can give you a little camera that'll cost $30. Done. But is this really ideal? Because part of the promise of the new technology in Zoom is that it's two-way.
I think going back to what Ed said.
Oh, but maybe what Ed says, maybe don't have them talk, but do let them send you questions, so it isn't an all-night thing without interaction. But they let the people who show up speak first, maybe?
Yeah.
And
applicants in person, people that, if it's a public hearing, people can do both. That I believe that's where
do
the
I'm
availability.
Speaking or just writing questions?
If we have video and they can access it by video, then do it that way. Or if they need, they don't.
So you guys don't
access,
agree. So let them continue to participate on video. You don't like that idea, Ed?
I'm not objecting in principle. I wonder if this is actually practicable. It would get so complicated and so involve so many people.
But what about
But
also, what about your issue? Your concern that we started this conversation with, which was that you can't work out things. If they're able to do that, you can't work out things if the participants aren't in the room together or going into the back room.
Largely, I think there is certainly a feeling. The I don't know. Yeah, the feeling in a hearing in person when all the people are present is that there's much more room to sort of think about it. What happens with Zoom is that everybody, it's like people just make speeches. It's very hard to get any kind of back and forth discussion going.
There's this portion with the back and forth conversation because normally that doesn't happen in city planning. When individuals outside of applicants that speak are those that are giving public testimony, and that's not a dialogue. That's when the public gets to state whatever it is that's on their mind. So they're not the ones that go outside and have a back and forth conversation. But it may be the builder, the developer, the person that put in the application that may need to go in the back room or out in the hallway to talk with their team about something that came up, or the staff. Yeah, for clarity, to bring something back and
but
say,
again,
okay,
they could text each other.
Oh, yeah, but
texting. And now you're having conversations outside, but it's part of when it comes to the texting, just like with the chat. If it's part of that forum that is supposed to be part of the public record, and how do you do these things?
They could text each other on the phone.
They could do that, but why would they do that if they're in person?
I'm
promoting that the applicants and staff and city planning would be in person and just have availability for the public to access the meeting, either virtually or alternatively.
All right, Harry Joe says on Zoom, people get to talk and hear from people they would never talk with. Hybrid would make the meeting even longer, and the people on Zoom would feel left out of the conversation much harder. Harry is interesting because he's not young. He's not as old as we are, but he lives much more online, even though he's this wonderful person to be in person with. He understands better than we do what it is to have most of your relationships occurring in cyberspace.
Yes.
Which is fact where the world is moving, which is something I think Ed and I hate a lot. But it is kind of moving that way.
Yes, it is.
But there is that distinction though with regards to the public and their input in our meetings. That only happens during public hearings. Only happens during public hearings. So there's still, whether it's in person or on Zoom or on Facebook or digital media, there's not a conversation. It's just testimony. It's just making your statement.
So Leslie sounds to me less convinced than Ed is that there's more exchange and conversation in person.
Exchange and conversation with whom? That's
at hearings. You're saying exchange and conversation is groups that come together, whether it's the team members or the team members and official, and that takes place. But the people who don't agree with each other and need to work something, that doesn't take place.
That doesn't take place even if we're in person. You know, when we have public hearings and individuals come up and would say, "I don't agree with this project," we don't have a discussion. They just state.
Well, yeah, but they can, if the opponents of, say, a new project are in the room with the people who are in favor of it, and the opponents say, if they just changed it this way, we might be able to find that acceptable. How does that process happen over Zoom?
Well, I'm wondering if there are more Harry Drozes, and especially younger generation, who are so used to living that way in a way we're not. We're used to having a cup of coffee or sitting each other after. Do people still, after public meetings, has this changed in your years? Do they still go out and have a beer afterwards? Did that happen more often? Like it used to be that if you're on a legislative body together or a city commission, most people went out afterwards and drank together and were socialized and talked about things comfortably.
Yeah. Nobody's ever invited me.
It takes a lot of trouble to keep you from...
I haven't been long enough, I guess.
Yeah, when you went to board Alders, right? Did anyone go to Christie's and places like that?
When I was an alder, yes. I was an alder for 7 years. So we did meet afterwards and sometimes before to talk about what was going on and also to needle each other.
And does that help you work better as a group, see each other as people?
Oh, I think so, yes. I thought so.
Whereas Harry Joes would argue when people do that online and kind of hang out together and have fun, that serves that purpose. Whereas people like, I don't know about you, Leslie, I can speak for you, but sound like Ed and I feel like it's not the same as hanging out together.
We
breaking
do.
bread.
We both think that.
Brian Poole says, good morning and thanks. Just want to say, like the Hamden Chief interview and watch the replay. Thanks for listening, Brian. You're listening to Dateline New Haven 103.5 FM live stream, newhavenindependent.org. We got Leslie Radcliffe, Ed Mattison talking about the City Plan Commission. So where do we go next? We've talked about possible hybrid meetings when the pandemic fully becomes an endemic.
Yeah.
Which I think it might be at this point for a lot of us, but not for very young people or very old people. Where do you want to take the City Plan Commission, Leslie Radcliffe? Any new directions?
I would like to see city planning spend time or get to that place where we actually start to look at the ordinances. The ordinance, where we actually take a look at what the ordinances are, if they still are applicable, if they need to change, if they need to be modified. However it is that we need to be able to get to that point, because we're always talking about it, but I don't know where it is on the timeline, that city planning will actually begin that work. Who does that work? Who actually looks at the ordinances? Is a committee? Is it city planning? I would just like us to start moving in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, we also need to talk more about how you create more affordable housing.
Well, now there's a big debate going on
major
nationally. So nationally, and in fact, like let's say people we could loosely define as like liberal or left advocates for affordable housing.
Yeah.
They're killing each other in California because they disagree so much. One side is convinced that the answer to more affordable housing is build, build, build. So if you have House Street, right, where all these big projects went up and totally changed the scale of the street and filled in empty spaces, all market rate for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Some people say that's the best way to create affordable housing, because if you increase the supply, then existing apartments, they can't charge you as much. So a block away on Dwight Street where the rents are high, they won't be able to keep going higher because there's competition. So you got these luxury apartments that luxury people move into, but the other people who are having trouble afford apartments can now pay the others through competition. The other side says that's a supply and demand theory.
I
mean,
know, but
people
it's
like,
a theory.
and the other side, but the other side's a theory too, which is that if you were where New Haven has gone, and they just advanced in all the committee the other day, was a plan that says if you build something new, you have to include a certain amount of affordable units in it.
Or don't build in New Haven.
And other people
That's
say...
the part. Or don't build in New Haven.
But Ed talked about unintended consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other side says if you require people to build those units, they won't be able to afford to make their money back. So they're not going to build them. So as Leslie says, they won't build in New Haven. And the result will be that you will have less affordable housing because there won't be enough housing and it will become more expensive. Again, as Ed said, theory. See, I'm agnostic. I don't know who's right because I think both sides have good points. Theories often don't work out in practice.
They're right.
People get what they can in the market. If more rich people come and look like New Haven's hotter, so you can charge more. Other people say, in reality, you have tons of older buildings, and it's not true that you'll be able to charge more. That if you look at a lot of apartment places like the condos they built in Fairhaven along the waterfront in the 80s, they charged a lot at first. They went bankrupt twice, and then it was working. School teachers and cops ended up moving to those places.
Right.
And even Section 8. So actually, Fairhaven in the 80s and 90s, I would argue, was the case for the build. Because even though that was all upscale housing,
Yes.
it didn't end up being upscale housing because human beings weren't all upscale. So these outside investors took a bath, but they were protected by our terribly unfair tax code.
Yeah.
So they didn't get hurt. But New Haven got more affordable housing. And it wasn't by requiring them to build affordable units. But then to Leslie's point, if you say, if you want to build here and make money because it's a hot market, you have to immediately make some available to people like they did at 360 State. And but then there's the third kind. Randy Salvatore included affordable housing at your guys' request in the Hill. And a lot of those people are Yale students. So they're considered lower income while they're in medical school before they make $500,000 a year.
God.
So that gets back to how much can you accomplish as a city planner. I'm not a libertarian, but the libertarians say, although I'm sympathetic on what they say, just let people be people and do what they do, and that works better than trying to make it better and then making it worse.
I'll get, beat up either in the comment section or whatever. I get beat up in the comment section.
You never get beat up.
But my views about, how to address affordability and inclusionary zoning is not necessarily textbook, and it's probably, going against the grain on some things because I see what the intention is when you talk about Fairhaven. What the intention was, was not what the outcome became. So let's look at the outcome and then work backwards to see how does it work, and let that be our intention, if that makes any sense. So when
that
you
makes
say,
a lot of sense, and I feel like I hear a consistent thread from you, Leslie Radcliffe, today, and every time I have the wonderful pleasure of talking to you, which is that you're making an argument for real life.
That's what works for me. Real
decisions.
life.
How does it affect a real person, how they're living, and how do we make the right decision?
Because I'm not mad at the folks that live downtown in luxury apartments. That's not where I want to live.
Right.
But where it is I do live, I do want to be comfortable and I want to be affordable. But now it's affordable for whom? And what is affordability? Affordability is going to be different for everyone. So you can't make that a cookie cutter. And my favorite one is, affordability is based on the AMI. Well,
Average
what is the
median
AMI
income
based on?
And is that the county or the city?
Thank you. And I hear the music, so.
No, keep going. Music's supposed to pump you up.
Okay. Well, the
music was
does pump
coming
me
when
up.
Leslie was preaching.
Yeah, right.
Well.
All right.
So affordability, inclusionary zoning. I can visualize it just as plain as day. A developer saying, well, I'm going to take my bag and I'm going to go somewhere else and build where these demands aren't being put on me. And someone will move in. It'll just be someone that has more money, can afford to pay what it is that I'm going to say is going to be the rent. Or I can come to the city of New Haven and I can build that very same structure and I can get tax abatements, so that I can provide the affordability, that to folks that are going to be under the guideline of whatever that affordability module is. But I'm still going to make my money, because now instead of $400,000, I'm only going to pay $40,000 in taxes, because the what's not being paid is going to be picked up by the small homeowners like myself and Mr. Ed, that get revaluations that say, their property is now worth twice as much, the market rate. So, the market rate in my neighborhood is not the same market rate as downtown New Haven, but somebody's got to make up the difference for the taxes that aren't being paid.
The market rate is not the same in your neighborhood
affordability.
as it is downtown. So that gets back to the very beginning of the show. We talked about parking density, where you say one rule size doesn't fit all.
One size does not
I learned
fit
a lot
all.
today, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on Dateline
Pleasure.
New Haven. Ed Mattison, Leslie Radcliffe, two of the true heroes of New Haven. Thank you, first of all, for the hours you spend making decisions about city planning. I would never do it under any circumstances.
You do.
You do.
No, I can go in the background. I can go in the back and joke around with somebody who was just talking or found something really kind of scuttlebutty or pursue the question I want. You guys really go out late at night for a lot of meetings, and I really respect and appreciate what you do and how you do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody else for joining us. Thanks for the comments. And we're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.